The road into the Appalachian Mountains had a way of narrowing not just in space but in spirit, as though the world itself were being slowly pressed into something older, something that remembered things long after people had forgotten them. Elias Mercer noticed it the moment his car left the main highway and began winding through the dense corridors of trees. The sky dimmed, though it was still early afternoon, and the forest leaned in on both sides, branches knitting together like fingers clasped in quiet conspiracy. He had come for a story. That was the excuse he told himself, and the one he told his editor, and anyone else who asked why he would drive alone into a region that most people only spoke about in lowered voices. There had been rumors, missing hikers, abandoned towns, whispers of strange lights that moved through the hollows at night. It was the kind of thing that used to thrill him, back when curiosity outweighed caution. Now, it felt more like an obligation. Something unfinished. The town he was headed to no longer appeared on most maps. Briar's Hollow. It had once been a mining settlement, thriving for a few decades before vanishing into obscurity after a series of incidents that official records described as industrial accidents. Elias had read those records. He had also read the testimonies that were never meant to be public, the ones that described sounds coming from beneath the earth, voices calling from shafts that had already been sealed, and shadows that moved where no light could reach. By the time he reached the last stretch of gravel road, the sun had dipped low enough to cast long, skeletal shadows across the ground. His tires crunched over loose stones, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. There were no birds, no insects, just the faint, almost imperceptible hum that seemed to seep up from the ground itself. Briar's Hollow appeared without warning, as though it had been waiting just beyond the bend. A handful of dilapidated buildings sagged under the weight of time, their windows dark and hollow like empty eyes. The mine entrance stood at the far edge of the settlement, a black wound carved into the mountainside, partially boarded up but not enough to conceal the depth of the darkness within. Elias parked near what must have once been the town's main street. The silence pressed in on him immediately when he stepped out of the car. It was thicker here, almost tangible. He could feel it in his chest, in the way his breath seemed to catch just slightly before each exhale. He grabbed his recorder and camera, forcing himself into the familiar routine of documentation. It helped to focus on details. The peeling paint on a storefront. The rusted hinges of a door that swayed gently despite the absence of wind. The faint smell of damp earth and something else, something metallic, like old blood. He found the church near the center of town. It was smaller than he expected, its steeple leaning at an angle that suggested it wouldn't withstand another harsh winter. The door creaked open with little resistance, revealing an interior coated in dust and decay. The pews were still intact, though warped and splintered, and at the far end stood a simple wooden altar. There were markings on the walls. At first, he thought they were just graffiti left by trespassers, but as he stepped closer, he realized they were older. Much older. Symbols carved directly into the wood, repeating patterns that seemed almost deliberate in their placement. Circles intersected by jagged lines, crude representations of something that might have been eyes, or mouths. He raised his camera, snapping a few shots, but the lens struggled to focus. The images blurred, the shapes shifting in ways that made his stomach tighten. "You shouldn't be here." The voice came from behind him, soft but unmistakably present. Elias turned sharply, his heart lurching. An old man stood near the entrance, his figure partially obscured by the dim light filtering through the doorway. His clothes were worn, his posture slightly hunched, but his eyes were sharp, fixed on Elias with an intensity that felt almost accusatory. "I didn't hear you come in," Elias said, lowering the camera. "Most don't," the man replied. "Not when the mountain's paying attention." Elias hesitated. "Do you live here?" The old man let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Live? No one lives here. Not anymore." "Then why are you here?" The man didn't answer immediately. He stepped further into the church, his gaze drifting over the carved symbols as though they were familiar. "I stayed," he said finally. "Someone had to remember." Elias felt a flicker of unease. "Remember what?" The old man looked at him again, and for a moment, something in his expression shifted, something like pity. "What they woke up," he said. The story came in fragments, pieced together through the old man's halting words and the growing sense of dread that coiled tighter with each passing minute. The miners had dug deeper than they were supposed to. That much was clear. There had been warnings, strange sounds, tools going missing, tunnels collapsing without cause. But the deeper they went, the richer the veins of coal became, and greed has always had a way of drowning out fear. Until the day they broke through. At first, it was just a cavity. A hollow space where there should have been solid rock. But it wasn't empty. The walls were smooth, almost polished, and covered in those same symbols Elias had seen in the church. The air was warmer there, unnaturally so, and it carried a faint whisper that no one could quite understand. They should have sealed it immediately. That was what the foreman ordered. But someone, no one ever admitted who, decided to go further. They said it was like the mountain was breathing, the old man murmured. Like it knew they were there. The first disappearance happened that night. A miner named Calloway. He had been on watch near the entrance to the new tunnel. One moment he was there, the next he was gone. No signs of struggle, no tracks, just his lantern, still burning, sitting on the ground. Then came the voices. They started faint, barely audible over the usual sounds of the mine. But they grew louder with each passing day. Calling out names, mimicking familiar tones. Men would hear their wives, their children, even though they were miles away. Some followed those voices. None came back. The town began to unravel after that. People stopped sleeping. Paranoia spread like a sickness. They boarded up the mine, nailed the entrance shut, and tried to pretend it had never happened. But the voices didn't stop. They came from beneath the ground, from the walls, from the spaces between thoughts. And then, the old man said, his voice dropping to a whisper, it started coming out. Elias felt his pulse quicken. What did? The old man didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured toward the carvings on the wall. They weren't warnings, he said. They were locks. A sound interrupted them then. A low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the very foundation of the church. Elias froze, his breath catching as the air grew noticeably warmer. You hear it now, don't you? The old man said quietly. The hum deepened, accompanied by something else, something like a distant whisper, layered and overlapping, too many voices speaking at once. Elias took a step back. What is that? The old man's gaze shifted toward the door, toward the darkening sky beyond. It's waking up again. The ground trembled slightly, just enough to send a fine layer of dust cascading from the ceiling. The carvings on the walls seemed to pulse in the dim light, their shapes warping in ways that defied logic. We have to leave, Elias said, his voice tight with urgency. The old man didn't move. You can leave, he said. If it lets you. The whispering grew louder, more distinct. Elias could almost make out words now, his name, repeated over and over in a chorus that felt both intimate and invasive. Elias. He staggered back, clutching his head as the sound pressed in from all sides. It knows you're here, the old man said. Why? Elias demanded, panic creeping into his voice. The old man's expression hardened. Because you came looking for a story, he said. And it's been waiting to tell one. The door slammed shut with a force that echoed like a gunshot. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the faint, unnatural glow of the carvings. The whispering became a roar. And somewhere, deep beneath the Appalachian Mountains, something long buried began to rise. And then the earth split. Not with the violent crack of stone alone, but with a deep, living groan that seemed to come from the bones of the mountain itself. The floor beneath Elias's feet shuddered so hard he was thrown against one of the old wooden pews, his shoulder striking the splintered edge with a sharp burst of pain. Dust rained from the rafters in thick gray curtains, choking the air, turning every breath into something heavy and bitter. The whispering had become unbearable. It was no longer coming from below. It was inside the church. Inside the walls. Inside him. Elias. The voice was no longer 100 voices layered together. Now it was one. Soft. Familiar. His mother's voice. He froze. For a moment the fear was replaced by something colder, something far more dangerous, recognition. His mother had been dead for 15 years. He remembered the funeral, the rain soaking through his black coat, the smell of wet soil, the way his father had stood like stone beside the grave and never cried. Yet now her voice moved through the darkness as clearly as if she stood beside him. My son. The old man's face tightened. Don't listen. But Elias's body had already turned toward the sound. Near the altar, where the darkness was thickest, a shape began to gather from the dust and shadow. At first it was only a pale outline, a woman's silhouette, long hair falling over narrow shoulders, hands folded gently in front of her. Then the face emerged. His breath stopped. It was her. Not merely similar. Not memory. Her exact face. The same tired but kind eyes. The same faint scar near the eyebrow. The same sorrowful smile. Tears stung Elias's eyes before he even realized he was moving. Mom, The old man lunged forward and grabbed his arm with surprising force. That isn't her. Elias jerked away. Let go of me. The figure stepped closer. Her lips parted. Elias, help me. Her voice trembled as though she were in pain, and the sound tore through him. Years of grief surged upward like floodwater breaking through a dam. Every regret, every word left unsaid, every night he had replayed their last conversation in his mind. The old man's warning became distant, muffled beneath the pounding of Elias's heart. He stumbled toward the altar. Toward her. The church darkened further, the shadows thickening around the woman's form until her lower body dissolved into smoke like tendrils that curled across the floorboards. Still Elias kept moving. The moment his fingers brushed hers, the illusion shattered. Her skin was ice cold. Not the cold of flesh. The cold of stone buried underground for centuries. Her smile widened. Too wide. The corners of her mouth stretched unnaturally toward her ears. Her eyes turned black. A scream ripped from Elias's throat as the thing seized his wrist. The old man shouted something, words Elias couldn't hear over the roar erupting beneath the church. The floor split open before the altar. Wood exploded upward as a jagged crack tore through the center aisle, exposing a shaft descending into absolute darkness. And from that darkness came breathing. Slow, heavy, immense. The thing wearing his mother's face was dragged backward by some invisible force, its body distorting like smoke caught in a storm. Its voice changed as it was pulled toward the opening. No longer gentle, no longer human. Now it was a grinding, layered sound like stone scraping against bone. You came back to us. The words seemed to come from everywhere at once. The walls, the floor, the air, the mountain. The old man grabbed Elias and yanked him away from the widening chasm just as skeletal hands began emerging from below. Human hands. Dozens of them. Gray and dirt-caked. Their fingers bent at impossible angles as they clawed against the broken wood. Faces followed. Men, women, children. Eyes hollow. Mouths open in silent screams. Elias staggered. Backward in horror. Who are they? The old man's face had gone pale. The ones it took. One of the figures pulled itself halfway out of the pit. Its mining helmet still clung to its skull, the rusted lamp flickering with a weak yellow glow. Its face was half rotted, skin hanging in strips from exposed bone. Yet Elias could still see the expression. Agony. Endless agony. They're not dead, the old man whispered. The words struck harder than anything else. Not dead. Not alive. Something in between. Trapped. The breathing from below grew louder. The church began to tilt as the earth beneath it shifted. Timbers cracked. Glass shattered. The old man turned to Elias, eyes blazing with urgency. The mine. What? That's where it started. That's where it must end. Another violent tremor nearly knocked them off their feet. The church ceiling groaned. A beam crashed down behind them. The old man pushed Elias toward the door. Go. This time the door flew open on its own. Cold night air rushed in. The entire town was shaking. Buildings swayed. Windows burst outward. The ground rippled like water beneath the moonlight. And all around Briar's Hollow, figures were emerging from the earth. Men and women in old mining clothes. Faces pale and ruined, walking slowly through the streets with jerking, unnatural movements. Every single one of them staring at Elias. The old man ran ahead toward the mine entrance, moving with a speed that belied his age. Elias followed, stumbling over broken stones and splintered wood. Behind them, the whispering swelled into a maddening chorus. The voices no longer merely called his name. Now they were begging, crying, screaming. The mine entrance loomed before them like the mouth of some colossal beast. The wooden board ceiling it had already been torn away from the inside. Deep in the darkness, something moved. Something vast. The old man stopped at the threshold. His shoulders sagged. There's something you need to know. Elias, breathless and terrified, stared at him. The old man looked older now, as if the night itself had drained years from him. I was there, he said. Elias frowned. What? I was one of the miners. The words hit him like a blow. That's impossible. The old man gave a hollow smile. I should have died that night. His gaze drifted into the mine. We found a chamber beneath the deepest shaft. Older than the mountain itself, or so it felt. Stone walls covered in symbols. At the center, something was buried. He swallowed hard. A coffin made of black rock. Elias's blood ran cold. We opened it. The mountain roared. A gust of hot air surged from the mine, carrying with it the stench of rot and wet earth. The old man continued, voice trembling. There was no body inside. Only darkness. And then the voices began. He looked at Elias with haunted eyes. It learns people through grief. Through pain, it becomes what you most need to see. His mother's face flashed in Elias's mind. It feeds on sorrow. Another tremor split the ground. The old man reached into his coat and pulled out a rusted iron lantern. Its glass was cracked, but a faint blue flame burned within. This was taken from the chamber. He pressed it into Elias's hands. The flame never dies. It's the only thing that can seal the dark again. Elias stared at the lantern. How? The old man looked toward the mine, where the breathing had become deafening. Take it back to the chamber. And then, the old man's face darkened. You won't come back the same. Before Elias could respond, a monstrous sound erupted from within the shaft. A shape began to emerge. At first it looked like smoke. Then flesh. Then something far worse. A towering mass of intertwined bodies crawled from the darkness, dozens of human forms fused together in a writhing pillar of limbs and faces. Eyes opened all across its surface. Hundreds of them, all staring directly at Elias. And in the center of that nightmare, one face stared back at him with terrible familiarity. His own. The creature smiled. The old man whispered, almost in prayer, God forgive us. Then he shoved Elias into the mine. The darkness swallowed him whole. The fall didn't last long. Elias slammed hard against a slope of loose gravel and jagged stone, the impact knocking the breath from his lungs in a violent rush. The lantern nearly slipped from his grasp, but he clutched it instinctively, fingers tightening around the rusted handle as though it were the only thing anchoring him to reality. For several seconds, he couldn't move. Above him, the entrance to the mine was already shrinking into a distant, fractured outline of moonlight, shaking and breaking apart as the mountain continued to shift. The silhouette of the old man was gone. There was no going back. The darkness below swallowed everything. Except the lantern. Its faint blue flame flickered, not like fire, but like something breathing. Each pulse of light revealed rough-hewn tunnel walls, damp with condensation, veins of coal glinting faintly like black glass. The air was thick, humid, and carried a smell so heavy it coated the inside of his throat. Rot. And something older. Something buried too long. Elias forced himself to sit up, wincing as pain flared through his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to climb back, to escape, to get out of this place before whatever was rising above found its way down. But the path behind him had already collapsed. A low rumble confirmed it. Stone grinding against stone, sealing him in. The whispering returned almost immediately. Closer now. No longer distant echoes. Now it felt like breath brushing against his ears. You came. He squeezed his eyes shut. No, he muttered under his breath. Not real. Not real. The lantern pulsed brighter. For a brief moment, the whispers receded, like something recoiling from the light. Elias noticed it instantly. The flame wasn't just light. It was keeping something back. That realization steadied him just enough to stand. The tunnel sloped downward, deeper into the mountain. Wooden supports lined the walls, many splintered or collapsed, others warped as if twisted by immense pressure. Old mining tools lay scattered along the ground, pickaxes, helmets, broken lanterns, all abandoned in a hurry. Dropped. His boots crunched softly over debris as he moved forward. Every step felt heavier than the last. The air grew warmer. The tunnel narrowed, and the sound began. At first, it was faint. A slow, rhythmic thud. Then another. And another. Like a heartbeat. Not his. Something below. The deeper he went, the stronger it became, vibrating through the soles of his feet, up through his bones, settling into his chest until it felt like his own heart was being forced to match its rhythm. Thud. 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 The lantern flickered again. Shadows along the walls stretched unnaturally, twisting into shapes that didn't match the contours of the rock. Faces appeared for split seconds, screaming, weeping, pleading, before dissolving back into darkness. Elias kept walking. He didn't know how long it had been. Time had begun to unravel. Minutes felt like hours. Or seconds. The tunnel eventually opened into a wider chamber. He stopped. The air here was different. Heavier. Alive. The walls were smooth, not carved by tools, but shaped, as though the stone itself had been molded. And covering every inch of those walls were the same symbols he had seen in the church. Only here, they were far more intricate. Layered. Endless. They spiraled inward toward the center of the chamber. Toward it. The coffin. It stood upright now, no longer buried. A monolith of black stone, taller than any man, its surface absorbing the lantern's light instead of reflecting it. The symbols carved into it seemed to shift slowly, like something trying to remember its own shape. The heartbeat was deafening here. Elias's hands trembled as he stepped closer. The lantern's blue flame flared violently, reacting to the presence of the coffin. The whispers returned, but now they were screaming. Don't. Stop. Run. But beneath them, deeper, calmer, open it. Elias froze. That voice. It wasn't his mother. It wasn't the miners. It wasn't anything human. It was something vast. Something patient. Something that had waited a very long time. His grip tightened around the lantern. I'm not opening anything, he said, his voice shaking despite the effort to steady it. Silence fell. Instant. Total. Even the heartbeat stopped. For a single, impossible moment, the entire mountain seemed to hold its breath. Then, something moved behind him. He spun around. The tunnel he had come from was gone. In its place stood figures. Dozens of them. The miners. But clearer now. More whole. Their bodies no longer decayed. Their faces no longer ruined. They looked almost normal. Except for their eyes. Completely black. One stepped forward. The same miner with the broken helmet. His mouth opened. When he spoke, it wasn't his voice. We are not prisoners. Another stepped forward. We are not victims. A third. We are part of it. Elias backed away slowly, heart pounding. No. The figures began to move closer in unison. Perfectly synchronized. We were afraid, they said together. But fear was the door. The coffin trembled. A thin crack formed along its surface. Blackness seeped out. Not liquid. Not smoke. Something else. Something that bent the air around it. Elias raised the lantern instinctively. The blue flame surged outward. The blackness recoiled. The miners stopped. For the first time, something like resistance appeared in their movements. The lantern worked. But not completely. The voice returned. Closer now. Inside his head. You don't understand. Images flooded his mind. Faster than he could process. The mountain before humans. Before trees. Before time, almost. Something buried deep beneath the earth. Not placed there, but grown there. Waiting. Learning. Listening. Every fear. Every grief. Every loss. It had absorbed them. Fed on them. Become them. I am what you bring with you, it whispered. Elias staggered, clutching his head. No. No. You came for a story. The crack in the coffin widened. Inside was nothing. And everything. Endless depth. Endless darkness. You came empty. The miners began moving again. Closer. Slower. Unstoppable. Let me fill you. The lantern flickered. For the first time, it dimmed. Elias's breath caught. No. The blue flame shrank, just slightly. But enough. The blackness surged forward. A tendril shot out from the coffin, fast as a striking snake, wrapping around Elias's arm. Cold. Not physical cold. Something deeper. A cold that reached into memory. Into thought. Into identity. His mind fractured. He saw himself as a child. As a teenager. Standing at his mother's grave. Alone. Always alone. You were always broken, the voice said softly. The tendril tightened. The lantern slipped. Fell. Hit the ground. The flame flickered violently. Elias screamed. Not from pain, but from the feeling of something entering him. Not his body. His mind. His memories. His grief. Being pulled apart. Rewritten. The miners were right in front of him now. Their hands reached out. Not attacking. Welcoming. Be with us. The lantern's flame sputtered. Almost gone. Elias's vision blurred. The world dimmed. And then, a memory surfaced. Small. Insignificant. But clear. His mother's voice. Not the false one. Not the thing's imitation. A real memory. Soft. Warm. You don't have to carry everything alone. Something shifted. The grip on his mind faltered, just for a second. But it was enough. Elias lunged. His fingers scraped across the ground. Found the lantern. Grabbed it. And with the last of his strength, he slammed it against the coffin. The blue flame exploded. Not outward, inward. Light poured into the crack, flooding the darkness. The voice screamed. Not words. Something far older. The tendril around his arm disintegrated instantly. The miners froze. Their bodies trembling violently as cracks of blue light spread across them. The coffin began to collapse inward, as though being crushed by something unseen. The chamber shook violently. Stone shattered. The symbols on the walls ignited in the same blue fire. The heartbeat returned, erratic. Failing. Elias collapsed to his knees, gasping. The light intensified. Blinding now. The voice, fading. You will come back, then silence. Total. Absolute. The light vanished. Darkness rushed in. Elias lay there, unmoving. The lantern beside him, extinguished. For the first time, far above, the mountain settled. Briar's Hollow fell silent once more. But deep beneath the Appalachian Mountains, something was still there. Not gone. Not dead. Just waiting again. For a long time, Elias did not move. There was no sense of time anymore, only darkness and the faint awareness that he still existed. His body felt distant, like something borrowed and poorly fitted. Every breath came slow and shallow, scraping through his lungs as if the air itself had weight. Then, gradually, sensation returned. Cold stone beneath his hands. The dull ache in his ribs. The metallic taste of blood in his mouth. And silence. Not the whispering. Not the breathing. Not the voice. Just silence. It was wrong. After everything, the noise, the presence, the suffocating pressure of something vast and aware, that silence felt unnatural, like a void left behind after something enormous had been ripped away. Elias forced his eyes open. Darkness. Complete. But not the same as before. This darkness didn't feel alive. It felt empty. He rolled onto his side, groaning as pain flared through his body. His fingers brushed against something cold and familiar. The lantern. He grabbed it instantly. For a moment, panic surged through him as he realized the flame was gone. The glass was cracked further now, the metal warped slightly from the force of the impact. But then, a faint glow. Deep inside the lantern. Not blue. Not bright. Just a weak, dying ember. Still there. Elias let out a shaky breath. Okay. Okay. His voice sounded strange, hoarse, distant, like it belonged to someone else. He pushed himself upright, using the lantern for support. The chamber was barely visible now, but as his eyes adjusted, he realized something had changed. The coffin was gone. Not broken. Not shattered. Gone. In its place was a depression in the ground, a smooth, circular hollow, like something had been pulled inward and erased. The symbols on the walls were gone too. Or rather, incomplete. Faded. Like scars where something had once been carved deep into the stone. Elias turned slowly. The miners were gone. No bodies. No movement. No trace. Just empty space. A hollow chamber beneath a silent mountain. He should have felt relief. Instead, unease crept through him, slow and persistent. Because something didn't feel finished. He staggered to his feet, lifting the lantern slightly. The faint glow stretched just far enough to reveal the edge of the chamber, and beyond it, a tunnel. It hadn't been there before. He was certain of it. The walls of this new passage were smoother than the rest, almost polished, and the air that drifted from it was warmer. Faintly, subtly, like breath. Elias froze. No, the word slipped out before he could stop it. The memory of the voice echoed in his mind. You will come back. His grip tightened around the lantern. I didn't come back, he whispered. I never left. The ember inside the lantern flickered. The tunnel waited. He knew what he should do. Find a way out. Climb. Escape. Forget all of this. But the thought felt incomplete. Like trying to walk away from a sentence that hadn't finished being spoken. And deeper still, a feeling he couldn't ignore. Not fear. Not curiosity. Something else. Recognition. Elias swallowed hard. Then, slowly, he stepped toward the tunnel. The moment he crossed its threshold, the temperature rose sharply. The air thickened, carrying that same scent he had noticed before, earth, rot, and something ancient. But beneath it now, something new. Something familiar. The tunnel sloped downward again, but more gradually this time. The walls reflected the faint glow of the lantern in strange ways, as if the stone itself was slightly translucent. Like skin stretched thin over something beneath. Elias tried not to think about that. Tried not to think about anything. But his mind wouldn't stay quiet. Fragments of memory kept surfacing. Not his. Or at least, not entirely. A miner swinging his pickaxe. A child crying in the night. A woman standing at the edge of the forest, staring into the dark. Hundreds of moments. Thousands. All overlapping. All bleeding into each other. Elias stumbled, catching himself against the wall. Stop. The word came out sharper this time. The images flickered, then paused. As if something had heard him. The tunnel widened slightly ahead. A faint glow pulsed in the distance. Not from the lantern. Something else. Elias approached slowly, every step deliberate. The glow grew stronger. Not blue. Not like the lantern. Warmer. Golden. Almost. Gentle. He stepped into another chamber. And stopped. It wasn't like the first. This one was smaller. Quieter. The walls were smooth and curved, forming a perfect dome overhead. At the center of the room stood a single object. A chair. Old. Wooden. Simple. And sitting in it, was him. Elias staggered backward, nearly dropping the lantern. The figure in the chair looked exactly like him. Same face. Same clothes. Same injuries. But cleaner. Still. Unmoving. Its eyes were open. Watching him. No. The word trembled out of his mouth. The seated version of Elias tilted its head slightly. Studying him. Then, it smiled. Not wide. Not monstrous. Just calm. You made it, it said. Elias's chest tightened. The voice was his own. Perfectly his. What is this? He demanded. The other Elias leaned back slightly in the chair, as if settling in. This is what's left. Of what? A pause. Then, you. The lantern flickered violently. Elias shook his head. No, no, that's not. This isn't real. The seated Elias chuckled softly. That's what you said about everything else. Silence stretched between them, heavy, uncomfortable. Then the other Elias leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. You think you sealed it, he said. Elias didn't respond. You didn't. A cold knot formed in Elias's stomach. What do you mean? The other Elias's smile faded. You closed the door. A pause. But you didn't leave. The lantern's ember dimmed slightly. Elias felt it this time. Not around him. Inside him. A faint echo. A presence. Quiet. Patient. The other Elias stood up slowly. Do you feel it? He asked. Elias took a step back. No. Don't lie. Another step forward. Closer now. You brought it with you. The words landed like a physical weight. Elias's breath quickened. That's not possible. The other Elias stopped just a few feet away. Close enough now that the resemblance became unbearable. Too exact. Too precise. No, it said softly. It's inevitable. The lantern flickered again. Weaker now. The other Elias glanced at it. That won't work anymore. Elias raised it anyway, his hand shaking. Stay back. The other Elias didn't move. It didn't need to. You don't understand yet, it said. Its voice shifted slightly. Layered. Not just his anymore. You were never escaping. The air in the chamber grew heavier. Warmer. The walls seemed to pulse faintly. Like something breathing. Elias's vision blurred for a moment. And in that moment, he saw it. Not outside. Inside. Something vast. Coiled. Waiting. The other Elias smiled again. Wider this time. Not quite human. You didn't come here to end the story, it said. A beat. You came here to continue it. The lantern went out. Complete darkness swallowed the room. And in that darkness, Elias heard his own voice whisper back to him. Welcome home. The darkness didn't stay empty for long. At first, Elias thought he had gone blind. Then he realized it was something worse, the absence of absence itself, a space where even darkness felt thin, as if it could be looked through rather than into. His breath came unevenly. He raised his hands in front of his face, but he couldn't see them. Not even their outline. Yet he could still feel them. That shouldn't have been comforting, but it was. A soft sound echoed in the chamber. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Approaching. Elias stepped backward instinctively, but his heel met nothing. The ground behind him had shifted without warning. He stumbled, caught himself, then froze again as the sound stopped directly in front of him. Something was there. Close enough that he could feel it. Not heat. Not breath. Presence. A pressure against reality. You're still afraid, the voice said. It was his voice again. But not from the other Elias he had seen. This one came from everywhere at once, as if the chamber itself had learned to speak. Elias swallowed hard. What are you? A pause. Then, I am what remained when you chose to look deeper. The air shifted. Not physically, but perceptibly, like the space around him had changed its attention. Images began to surface in Elias's mind again, but not memories this time. Possibilities. Countless versions of himself standing at different points in time. Walking into Briar's Hollow. Never leaving his apartment. Dying in a car crash on the way. Never being born at all. Each version flickered briefly, then collapsed back into darkness. You think there was only one path, the voice continued softly. There never was. Elias clenched his jaw. Stop talking like this. Show yourself. A faint sound, almost like amusement. You've already seen me. The air in front of him shifted. Not visually at first, but emotionally. A familiarity rising without reason. Then slowly, faint light returned, not from above or below, but as if reality itself was remembering how to exist. And in that fragile glow, Elias saw it. Not a monster. Not a figure. But a reflection. Not in a mirror. In space itself. A version of the chamber formed around him like glass taking shape, and within it, his outline became visible. But wrong. Slightly offset. Standing where he stood, but not moving when he moved. It was him. And not him. The reflection tilted its head. Elias didn't. You finally see it, the voice said gently. Elias's throat tightened. See what? The reflection smiled faintly. That there was never anything else down here. The chamber trembled softly. The walls began to shift again, not collapsing this time, but rearranging, like a memory correcting itself. Elias stepped forward involuntarily. The reflection did not. Instead, it remained exactly where it was, watching him with calm certainty. You weren't sent here, it said. You came here because you remembered something you were never meant to keep. Elias shook his head. No, I was investigating. I was following the story. A pause. Then the reflection's smile faded. That is the story. The chamber dimmed slightly. And you've told it before. Elias felt something cold rise in his chest. What are you saying? The reflection stepped closer now, not moving through space, but letting space form around it. Every time you descend, it said, you call it curiosity. A beat. But it is recognition. The air tightened. Elias felt it then, not around him anymore, but inside him. A sensation like a locked door turning slightly. The reflection raised a hand. Elias didn't, but he felt it anyway. A touch, not physical, but structural, as if something inside him had been gently pressed. Images flooded in again, stronger this time. Not possibilities, cycles. The mine opening, the town forming, the warning symbols, the descent, the voice, the ceiling, the silence, and then, the beginning again. Elias didn't turn the key off. He should have. Every rational thought he still possessed screamed at him to stop the engine, step out, walk away from the road, and never look back at the mountains again. But his body didn't respond in the way fear demanded. It responded in something quieter, heavier, like memory trying to complete a pattern. The whisper had settled into the car now. Not echoing, not fading, just present, as if it had always been there, waiting for him to notice it properly. Elias. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel until his knuckles went pale. His eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead, but the forest seemed different than before. The trees were the same shape, the same density, but their arrangement felt intentional now, like something had placed them there rather than grown them. He swallowed. No, he said aloud, though he wasn't sure who he was answering. The voice didn't react. It never reacted like something separate. It simply continued. You stopped for a moment, it said gently. That is new. A chill crawled up his spine. He turned his head slightly, scanning the passenger seat. Empty. Of course it was empty. And yet, the feeling of occupancy was undeniable, like someone had just leaned forward from the shadows and withdrawn again. Elias slowly reached for the ignition again, intent now sharpened into panic. His fingers touched the key, and the radio clicked on by itself. No static, no tuning, just sound. A field recording, old, crackling, footsteps on gravel, breathing, men speaking in low, tired voices. A mining crew. Elias froze. The sound was coming from inside the car speakers, but it wasn't modern audio. It was something recorded in a different time, played back without permission. One of the voices spoke clearly. We shouldn't be this deep. Another laughed nervously. You always say that. Then a third voice, closer to the microphone, almost intimate. Did you hear that? Silence on the recording. Then, a sound Elias recognized too well. The mountain. Breathing. The radio distorted sharply. A burst of noise. A scream cut off mid-syllable. Then silence. The radio clicked off. The car returned to its normal hum. Elias sat completely still. His heartbeat was the only thing he could hear now. And then the whisper returned, softer than before. Do you remember now? His throat tightened. Remember what? The forest outside the windshield seemed to darken slightly, though the sky had not changed. Not this road, the voice said. A pause. Before the road. Elias shook his head slowly. I've never been here before. The silence that followed was almost patient. Then the voice replied. That is not what the mountain remembers. A pressure built in his chest. Not physical pain. Recognition without permission. Images flickered at the edge of his thoughts, too fast to hold, too fractured to trust. A different car. A different night. Rain hitting glass. Headlights disappearing into fog. The same road, but older, less defined, like it had not yet decided what shape it would become. Elias pressed his palm against his forehead. Stop, he whispered. The voice did not stop. Instead, it softened. You always say that here. A distant sound echoed outside the car. Not loud, just present enough to notice. A knock. On the driver's side window. Elias went rigid. Slowly, he turned his head. Nothing was there. Only trees. But the window had fogged from the outside. And in the condensation, something was forming. Letters. Not written. Condensed from breath. Elias. He jerked back violently, hitting his head against the seat. No, he said again, louder this time. No, I'm not. This isn't happening. The whisper responded immediately. It is already happening. The engine suddenly died. Not turned off. Not stalled. Just stopped, as if it had forgotten how to run. The headlights flickered once, then dimmed. The forest outside darkened further, even though the sky remained unchanged. Elias reached for the door handle, desperate now, movements sharp and uncoordinated. The moment his hand touched it, the temperature inside the car dropped sharply. Not cold air, absence of warmth, like something exhaling through the metal itself. The whisper came closer. Not in volume, in proximity. You are closer than before. Elias hesitated. Something in that sentence didn't feel like threat. It felt like measurement, like progress. He forced the door open. The forest air hit him immediately, thick, damp, heavy with that same scent he had smelled underground. His boots touched gravel, then soil, then something softer beneath it that he didn't want to identify. He stepped away from the car. It did not look damaged. It looked paused, like it was waiting for him to return to it in the correct sequence. Behind him, the road stretched in both directions, but neither direction felt like escape. The trees lined it too evenly, too deliberately, as if forming a corridor rather than a path. The whisper was no longer inside the car. It was around him now. Look. The command was simple, not forceful, inevitable. Elias turned slowly, and saw the forest had changed. Not dramatically, not in ways that would immediately scream impossibility. But subtly, structurally wrong. The spacing between trees had shifted. The shadows between them had deepened into consistent vertical shapes. Like mine shafts. He stepped forward despite himself. One step, then another. The ground beneath him became less gravel and more compacted earth. The air grew warmer. The smell intensified, and then he saw it. A wooden sign, half buried, rotting, barely readable. Briar's Hollow. Elias froze. His breath caught painfully in his chest. No, the whisper responded, almost gently, you drove in circles. He shook his head, stepping backward. That's impossible. I left. I saw the highway. His words faltered. Because he couldn't remember the exit. Not clearly. Not anymore. The memory was there, but unstable, like something had been overridden just slightly. The whisper continued. The mountain does not let stories leave unfinished. Elias stared at the sign. Then beyond it, where the trees opened slightly. And in the distance, dim shapes. Buildings. Broken. Waiting. Briar's Hollow. Again. Or still. He didn't know anymore. The whisper softened one last time, almost tender. You came back correctly this time. A pause. Then, now continue.